A little boy asks Melania Trump about God. Her words leave him crying tears of joy. The wind cut through the dimly lit streets, swirling dried leaves around a lone figure huddled in the doorway of a closed coffee shop. Her coat, thin and tattered, did little to shield her from the biting cold. Each breath she exhaled formed a faint mist in the night air as she pulled her arms tighter around herself. Her fingers, numb from the cold, clenched the edges of her sleeves, the only barrier she had against the relentless winter. Pedestrians passed her without a glance, their hurried steps echoing off the wet pavement. The world moved on, indifferent to her presence. From the other side of the street, a black Tesla with sleek, unblemished edges and its headlights cutting through the darkness slowed to a stop. Inside, a man observed the scene unfolding before him. His fingers drummed lightly against the steering wheel, his mind calculating, assessing as always. It was Elon Musk, though in this moment he was simply a man witnessing something he couldn't ignore. He had spent his career solving complex problems, but the one in front of him, the quiet suffering of a stranger, was not one he could analyze with data and algorithms. It required something far simpler yet infinitely more powerful: humanity. He stepped out of the car, his breath visible in the cold. His footsteps were deliberate, each one bringing him closer to the fragile figure curled against the doorframe. The woman didn't notice him at first, her head bowed, lost in the depths of exhaustion and hopelessness. But then, a shadow fell over her, and she slowly lifted her gaze. Her eyes, wide with a mix of fear and disbelief, met his. "Are you all right?" Elon's voice was calm, even, yet tinged with genuine concern. She hesitated before answering, as if trying to decide whether he was real or just another cruel trick played by the universe. Finally, she shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I just need somewhere warm." Her words cut through him in a way he hadn't expected. He had built spaceships, revolutionized energy, pushed the limits of what humanity thought was possible. But in this moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was the shivering woman in front of him, the sheer weight of her reality pressing down on her frail shoulders. "Come with me," he said simply. Her hesitation lingered, a lifetime of distrust fighting against the sliver of hope his words offered. But as another gust of wind ripped through her, she found herself rising, her limbs stiff from hours in the cold. He led her to the Tesla, opening the door and gesturing for her to get in. She hesitated again before slipping inside, the warmth of the car wrapping around her like a forgotten embrace. As the car hummed to life, she glanced at him, her voice laced with both wariness and gratitude. "Why are you helping me?" Elon exhaled, his grip tightening on the wheel for a fraction of a second. "Because I can." The car glided through the city streets, the neon lights casting fleeting colors against the windshield. He didn't pry, didn't demand her story. Instead, he let the silence settle, giving her space to breathe, to exist without expectation. It wasn't long before they arrived at a quiet, unassuming building, a place far removed from the polished glass of corporate skyscrapers. "This is a shelter," he explained as they stepped out of the car. "They'll take care of you here. Get you what you need." She looked at the building, then back at him. "Why do you care?" she asked again, this time with something softer in her voice, something closer to hope. He considered his answer before speaking. "Because I've been told my whole life to solve problems. I can't fix everything, but I can do this." She nodded, as if accepting the answer not just from him, but from the world itself. As she stepped toward the entrance, she turned back one last time. "Thank you." He watched as the doors closed behind her, the warmth of the shelter swallowing her whole. Then, with a deep breath, he turned and walked back to his car, the night stretching ahead of him. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he had truly changed something. Jenna stepped through the doors of the shelter, her body still stiff from the cold, her mind struggling to accept that this was real. The warmth inside enveloped her immediately, a stark contrast to the bitter air she had just left behind. A woman behind the front desk looked up, offering a gentle smile. "Welcome," she said softly, setting aside the paperwork she had been reviewing. "Can I get you something? Coffee? A warm meal?" Jenna hesitated, her instincts telling her this was too good to be true. People didn't just help others without a price. At least, that had always been her experience. But then she remembered the man who had brought her here, the billionaire whose face she had only ever seen in headlines, now the person who had stopped for her when no one else had. She nodded slowly. "It would be nice." The woman motioned to a small kitchenette in the corner of the lobby. "Go ahead and help yourself. There's food too if you're hungry." Jenna took cautious steps forward, her hands shaking as she poured the steaming liquid into a cup. It had been so long since she had touched anything warm. Her fingers, still numb, curled around the cup, absorbing the heat as she took her first sip. The bitterness spread across her tongue, grounding her in reality. This was happening. She wasn't outside anymore. She wasn't invisible. She was here. A quiet voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Is this your first night?" Jenna turned to find a woman about her age standing beside her. She had short brown hair tucked beneath a knit beanie and wore a slightly oversized sweater that looked well-worn but clean. There was kindness in her eyes, but also something Jenna recognized, an understanding that only came from experience. Jenna nodded. "Yeah." The woman smiled. "I've been here about a month. It takes a while to believe it's real." She reached for her own cup of coffee, then extended her free hand. "I'm Rachel." Jenna hesitated before shaking it. "Jenna." Rachel nodded toward the seating area by the fireplace. "Come sit with me." Jenna followed, still feeling like a stranger in a world that wasn't hers. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Rachel spoke again. "So, how'd you get here?" Jenna let out a shaky breath, staring into her coffee. She had been asked that question before, but always by people who wanted to judge, who wanted to confirm their own beliefs about why someone like her had ended up on the streets. But with Rachel, it felt different. Still, she wasn't sure if she had the strength to say it all out loud. "I lost everything," she whispered. "My job. My home. I tried to get back on my feet, but once you fall, it's hard to climb out." Rachel nodded as if she already knew. "Yeah," she said softly. "It's like the world keeps moving, and you're stuck watching it from the outside." Jenna swallowed hard. "Exactly." Rachel offered a small smile. "Well, at least now you're inside." Jenna looked around, really looking this time. The shelter wasn't just a place to sleep, it was a place to start over. People here weren't just surviving. They were trying to rebuild. And for the first time in a long time, she wanted that too. Elon's next move. The next morning, Jenna woke up in a real bed. Not a park bench. Not a cold sidewalk. A real bed. For a moment, she just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the muffled sounds of breakfast being served in the common area. She could hear the laughter of children, the quiet hum of conversation. She exhaled, sitting up slowly. This was her chance. She wouldn't waste it. As she got dressed, she couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was waiting for her. And she was right. Because at that very moment, Elon Musk was thinking about her. Sitting in his office, he scrolled through his phone, his mind still on the woman he had left at the shelter the night before. He had done his part, given her a warm place to stay, but was that enough? He didn't believe in temporary solutions. He believed in fixing the problem at its core. He set his phone down and pressed the intercom button. "Get my team in here." Minutes later, 3 of his senior advisors walked in, clearly puzzled. They were used to discussing space missions and AI advancements, not whatever this was. "Elon, what's this about?" one of them asked. Elon leaned forward, his hands clasped together. "I want to start a new initiative. A program that helps people who are ready to rebuild their lives." The advisors exchanged glances. "You mean like a charity?" "No," Elon said firmly. "Not a handout. An opportunity." He stood up, pacing slightly. "People don't just need food and shelter. They need jobs, training, resources. If we create something sustainable, we can help them get back on their feet permanently." His mind was already racing with possibilities. He could partner with tech companies, manufacturing plants, small businesses. He could create a system where people like Jenna didn't just survive, they thrived. "Find me experts," he said. "I want a team dedicated to this by the end of the week." His advisors still looked skeptical, but none of them argued. They knew better than to question him when his mind was set on something. Elon Musk wasn't just a man of ideas. He was a man of action. Jenna's unexpected call. Jenna was helping clean up breakfast trays when a staff member approached her with a curious expression. "Jenna? There's someone on the phone for you." Jenna frowned. No one ever called for her. "Who is it?" The staff member hesitated. He said his name is Elon. Jenna's heart stopped. She wiped her hands quickly and rushed to the front desk, taking the phone with shaking fingers. "Hello. Elon Musk," the familiar voice said. "How are you?" Jenna gripped the phone tightly, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for what you did." "I didn't do much," he said easily. "But I want to do more." Jenna frowned. "What do you mean?" "I want to offer you something," Elon said. "Training. A real future." Jenna felt her breath hitch. What? "There's a new program I'm launching," he explained. "It's for people like you, people who are ready to start again but just need the opportunity." Her mind spun. A job? A chance to work again? She had dreamed of this. "But I don't know what to say," she whispered. Elon's voice was calm. "Say yes." Jenna's fingers tightened around the phone. This was it. Her moment. A chance to finally leave the past behind. She took a deep breath. And then she said the one word that would change everything. "Yes." Jenna stood there, the weight of her decision sinking in. She had just told Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, that she was ready. Ready to leave behind the past. Ready to take control of her life. Ready to believe that she could be someone again. And for the first time in years, she felt hope. A new beginning. The next morning, a black Tesla pulled up in front of the shelter. Jenna stood by the entrance, nervous but determined. The woman who had arrived at this place broken and lost was not the same woman standing here now. She had a purpose. She had a future. The driver stepped out and nodded. "Jenna?" She swallowed hard and nodded back. "Mr. Musk is waiting for you." The meeting that changed everything. Jenna was led into a sleek, modern office building, the kind she had once walked past, wondering what it must be like to work in a place like this. And now, she was walking inside. The receptionist didn't look at her with pity or judgment. Instead, she smiled and said, "Go right in. He's expecting you." Jenna's fingers tightened around the straps of her bag. This is real. She stepped into the office. Elon Musk sat behind a massive desk, scrolling through something on his laptop. The city skyline stretched behind him, sunlight pouring into the room. When he looked up and saw her, he smiled. "Welcome, Jenna." She hesitated for only a second before stepping forward. "Hi." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." She did. For a moment, there was silence. Then Elon leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "You're probably wondering what happens next." Jenna exhaled. "Yeah." Elon nodded. "I'm starting something new. A program to help people who've hit rock bottom but want to rebuild. You'd be one of the first." Jenna's heart pounded. He wasn't just offering her a job. He was offering her a role in something bigger. "I don't know anything about running a business," she admitted. Elon smirked. "Neither did I when I started." Jenna blinked. "You're Elon Musk." He chuckled. "And you're Jenna. Titles don't matter. What matters is what you do next." She swallowed hard. He leaned back. "What do you want to do, Jenna?" Jenna stared at her hands. What did she want? For so long, she had just been trying to survive. But now she had a chance to live. She thought about the bakery where she had once worked. The smell of fresh bread. The feeling of kneading dough with her hands. The joy of watching people take the first bite of something she had made. Her chest tightened. "I want to bake again," she whispered. Elon's eyes flickered with something she couldn't quite read. "Then let's make it happen." The training begins. Over the next few weeks, Jenna's life completely changed. Elon didn't just hand her success. He made her work for it. She trained with some of the best bakers in the industry, learning the business side of running a bakery. She took finance courses. She sat in meetings with mentors and investors. At night, she collapsed into bed, exhausted but exhilarated. Every morning, she woke up hungry for more. Because for the first time in years, she wasn't just surviving. She was building something. And then one day, Elon called her into his office. "It's time," he said. Jenna frowned. "For what?" Elon smirked. "To open your own bakery. Grand opening day." Jenna stood in front of her brand new bakery, staring at the sign above the door. Second Rise Bakery. She had chosen the name because that's what this was. A second rise. Not just for bread, but for her. A crowd had gathered outside. Locals, reporters, even some of the people she had met at the shelter. And among them? Elon Musk. He stood in the back, arms crossed, watching her like a proud mentor. She swallowed hard, the ribbon-cutting scissors feeling heavy in her hands. This was it. Her moment. She took a deep breath and cut the ribbon. The crowd cheered. And just like that, she was no longer a homeless woman on the streets. She was a business owner. A full-circle moment. Months later, Jenna stood behind the counter of Second Rise Bakery, kneading dough as the morning rush began. She greeted customers by name, smiling as they sipped their coffee and enjoyed fresh pastries. The bakery was thriving. But more than that, she was happy. And then, one morning, something happened that made her pause. A young man hesitated outside the bakery, staring at the "Now Hiring" sign in the window. He looked just like she had, all those months ago, nervous, uncertain, lost. Jenna wiped her hands on a towel and walked to the door, pushing it open. "Looking for a job?" she asked gently. The young man nodded hesitantly. "Yeah, I guess." She smiled, stepping aside. "Then come in." He hesitated, just like she had. But then he stepped inside. And just like that, the cycle continued. Because second chances weren't just given. They were passed on. Epilogue: Elon's final reflection. Elon Musk sat in his office late at night, scrolling through his phone. His eyes landed on a familiar name. Second Rise Bakery. 1 year later, a success story. A photo of Jenna standing proudly in front of her bakery filled the screen. Elon smirked. He hadn't spoken to her in months. Hadn't needed to. Because she had done exactly what he knew she would. She had built something real. And that was all the thanks he needed. Power wasn't just about wealth. It was about creating opportunities. And sometimes, it was about betting on the right people. Elon set his phone down, his smirk widening slightly. Somewhere out there, someone else was waiting for a chance. And maybe, just maybe, he'd find them next. The morning rush filled the bakery with the comforting hum of conversation, the soft clinking of coffee cups against saucers, and the occasional burst of laughter from a table near the window. The scent of fresh bread and cinnamon rolls wrapped around Jenna like a warm embrace as she worked behind the counter, rolling out dough with a steady rhythm. It still amazed her how natural it felt, how her hands remembered every technique, every precise movement, even after years of struggle. This was home now, a place she had built from the ground up, and every customer who walked through the doors reminded her of how far she had come. She barely had a moment to breathe before the bell above the entrance chimed, signaling a new customer. Jenna glanced up, wiping her hands on her apron, ready to greet whoever it was. But when she saw him, her breath caught. Standing just inside the doorway, dressed in his usual casual attire of jeans and a fitted t-shirt, was Elon Musk. He was watching her with that same unreadable expression, the one that made her feel as if he saw more in her than she sometimes saw in herself. He stepped forward, scanning the bakery with quiet curiosity before stopping at the counter. "Nice place," he said, his voice carrying its usual calm authority. Jenna smiled, still catching up to the fact that he was actually here. "You think so?" Elon nodded, his gaze flicking over the menu written in careful chalk on the board behind her. "I knew you'd make it happen." She exhaled, shaking her head with a small laugh. "I almost didn't. But you knew, didn't you?" Elon smirked. "Of course." Jenna studied him for a moment before reaching for a plate, grabbing one of the fresh croissants she had just finished baking. She slid it across the counter toward him. "On the house." Elon raised an eyebrow but took the pastry without argument, tearing off a piece and tasting it. A slow nod of approval followed. "Not bad," he said, a teasing glint in his eye. "Not bad." Jenna scoffed. "That's probably the best thing you've eaten all week." Elon smirked but didn't deny. "You're probably right." The two of them fell into an easy silence, the sounds of the busy bakery filling the space between them. Jenna leaned against the counter, crossing her arms as she studied him. "You don't do this, do you?" Elon tilted his head slightly. "Do what? Come back to check on people?" He considered that for a moment before nodding. "Not usually." "Then why me?" she asked, genuinely curious. Elon set the half-eaten croissant down on a napkin. "Because you didn't just take the help," he said simply. "You built something from it. That's rare." Jenna felt something tighten in her chest. She had spent so long feeling like she was just surviving, waiting for the next disaster to knock her back down. But now, she wasn't just surviving. She was thriving. And Elon had seen that in her before she had even seen it in herself. She wiped her hands on her apron again, a nervous habit she hadn't quite shaken. "So, what now? You just disappear again?" Elon chuckled, shaking his head. "Maybe." Jenna rolled her eyes but smiled. "Figures." He glanced around the bakery once more, taking in the happy customers, the staff working with ease, the warmth that filled the space. Then he turned back to her, his expression serious. "Keep going," he said. Jenna met his gaze, understanding what he meant without needing further explanation. She nodded. "I will." Elon gave her a small nod, then, without another word, turned and walked toward the door. She watched as he stepped outside, disappearing into the city as effortlessly as he had arrived. Jenna exhaled, a slow smile spreading across her face. She turned back to the counter, grabbed another batch of dough, and got back to work. Because this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. As Jenna kneaded the dough in front of her, she couldn't help but replay the conversation with Elon in her mind. His words carried more weight than she wanted to admit. He had seen something in her, something she had been afraid to believe in for so long. But standing here in her bakery, surrounded by the scent of freshly baked bread and the hum of customers chatting and laughing, she realized something. This place wasn't just a business. It was proof that second chances were real. That someone could be at rock bottom one day and thriving the next. That a single act of kindness could change the trajectory of a person's entire life. She wiped her hands on her apron, moving toward the front of the bakery as a young woman approached the counter. She looked nervous, shifting on her feet, her hands stuffed into the pockets of a worn-out jacket. Jenna recognized the look in her eyes. Hesitation. Fear. The unspoken battle of wanting to ask for help but not knowing if she had the right to. Jenna had been there. She offered a warm smile, the same kind she had once longed for when she had nothing. "Hey there," she said gently. "Looking for a job?" The young woman blinked, as if surprised someone had noticed her. I saw the sign in the window," she mumbled. "I don't have experience, but I can learn." Jenna nodded, her chest tightening with familiar emotion. "You don't need experience," she said. "You just need a chance." The young woman stared at her, her lips parting slightly as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Jenna handed her an application. "Fill this out. And don't worry, we'll figure the rest out together." The girl took the paper carefully, like it was something fragile. "Thank you," she whispered. Jenna simply smiled. "Someone gave me a chance once. It's only right that I do the same." As the girl nodded and stepped away, Jenna felt a familiar warmth spread through her chest. This was what mattered. This was why she kept going. She turned back to the counter just as an older man stepped up, scanning the display of pastries with appreciation. "You run this place?" he asked. Jenna nodded. "Yes, sir." The man chuckled, picking up a croissant. "I've been coming here for weeks, and I gotta say, this is some of the best bread I've ever had." Jenna laughed softly. "Thank you. We work hard to make it that way." The man reached into his pocket, pulling out his wallet. "You ever think about expanding?" Jenna froze slightly, the question catching her off guard. I don't know," she admitted. The man handed her cash, nodding as if he already knew her answer. "You should. A place like this? It's more than a bakery. It's a story people want to be a part of." Jenna swallowed hard, nodding as she rang up his order. "Maybe someday," she said softly. And for the first time, she realized she actually meant it. She wasn't afraid of what came next. She was ready. As the morning rush continued, Jenna felt a sense of peace settle over her. Elon had given her a door to walk through, but she was the one who had built the life on the other side. And that was something no one could take away.